Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is January 2026. I want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Also want to thank Irina, but I'm not good at pronouncing her name correctly. So Moritz, please tell me, who are we thanking that connect us?
Irene Kurka.
Very good. And your name is Moritz Eggert. Is that right?
That sounds pretty okay.
Yeah. Pretty okay. Where are you calling from?
From Munich, Germany again. It's late in the night, and I just came from the university reviewing an exam of a student, and now I'm ready to talk to you.
I'm so honored, and I really appreciated part one, which we did June 20th of 2025. And I want to start with something that happened to me today. Mm-hmm. And I read this book, Finnegan's Wake, with people from all over the world all the time out loud, something you don't normally do with a book and with a group of people. And just as I was thinking, because it stimulates people's thinking while you're reading, you're really concentrating, but of course your mind wanders. Just as I was thinking, how am I going to word this to Moritz? This line came up. And it's on page 115, and I just want to read it. So why, pray, sign anything as long as every word, letter, pen stroke, paper space is a perfect signature of its own? Question mark. A true friend is known much more easily and better into the bargain by his personal touch, habits of full or undress movements. Now, it's pretty much not gobbledygook. That's a pretty straightforward word. So people always go, well, it's just a book of gobbledygook. But the word that got me was paper space. Yeah. Now, it could be pronounced papers pace. So it's up to the reader to pronounce it the way they want. I pronounced it paper space. What you talked about in part one that really got me was something you talk about with your students, and it's called the wild space.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm writing an essay right now on the safe place, the sacred place, and I'm going to add your thing, the wild place, but you call it space. So it's sort of a twofold question. And sorry, it's so detailed intro is, Carl Andre, the sculptor, goes sculpture as place. In Sun Ra says space is the place. So, what is the difference between place and space, especially in your recommending to your students wild space? Is there something different, or are they pretty much the same, or anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think it has to do, Gerry, with the German translation of space and place, which might actually result in me thinking of them a bit different than an English speaker. Because space would be translated to Raum, which is also our word for space. I mean, like the universe, But a place is Ort. And that is a very definite German word where you say, okay, we actually have a verb also, which is verorten. So to place something is like, this is a typical German word, verorten. So you have the place, and then you can say exactly where something is. And I called the wild space der wilde Raum, because for me the word Raum is something infinite. Whereas the word place is something very specific that has, certain dimension that is finite.
And parameters.
It has parameters. So for me, art is infinite. And the wonderful thing about creativity and art as a mirror of nature is that it is basically infinite. Yeah. And so for me, the word space was a bit more fitting.
I love it. Now, could you spell the German word for space? How do you spell that?
It's actually the same word as the word for room, which is a bit confusing. So it's Raum.
So
Yeah?
it's spelled ROOM?
RAUM
Okay, that's the German. And the German spelling for place is?
is Ort. ORT.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful how you're concise and articulate, because it flows right into the next question.
Yeah.
James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He
Yeah.
basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, William Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Yeah, I think the answer is a continuation of our last discussion, because we always try as human beings, we always try to create some kind of narrative. This is our biggest curse at the moment, because we have all kinds of really stupid narratives going on social media at the moment, which confuse people. But the urge to create a narrative of some kind, to like have a reasoning or a little story or something, is something extremely human. I think it goes back to Stone Age, basically. Yeah, the first mothers telling stories to their children in Stone Age language. I don't know, but there's a narrative always. There's a narrative. I go out hunting. I have an adventure. I bring back the saber-toothed tiger or whatever they ate at that point. Yeah. So that already creates a story. I have an adventure. I have a quest. I go out. I come back. I tell my family in the cave what I've experienced. So the experience of seeing the tree in a cinema, which is already a cave-like construction, we have to remember it's dark, yeah, and something is projected. So that is like the cave, the cave theory of the old Greeks and everything. It's already there. So it's a very different experience of seeing the tree in real life and just passing a tree on the way to work, which might be a very banal thing, something that is not extremely interesting. But once you project it in a cinema, in like a sacred, semi-sacred place in a way, it becomes part of a narrative. And that is a different experience. Of course, we are so overwhelmed with narratives that, of course, we also forget a lot of these narratives. And something that happens on the way to work might actually be more poignant, or something that we remember more than the film that we saw, because we see so many films, read so many books, we tend to confuse all these narratives. But of course, it's a different thing. And as an artist, I'm, of course, very close to this narrative tradition. Even if I do music and it's perhaps a story that you couldn't really retell easily, but it is still a narrative of some kind. And I always think of my pieces, of my work in some way. I'm always trying to tell some story, or at least have the listener create their own story or whatever. I cannot force my story on them, but music has its own abstract narrative. And I love abstract narratives, because some things don't have to have a definite meaning. They can have several meanings. And that makes it very complicated, but also very beautiful. But that is, I think, the answer to this criticism of James Joyce. But I think his reaction is very similar to my reaction today to AI art, and the lure of having computers create art for me. And then I would say I want to create the art myself as an artist. So I can feel with James Joyce, actually. And he probably was seeing this development at this point 100 years ago. He was seeing where the cinema would lead to at some point, to computers that tell you stories and that give you answers, or even create art for you. And I think that was probably the vision he already had at the time, perhaps.
It's really good, Moritz, because the hardcore Joyceans, I interview them all, and they go, "Joyce never said that." And I heard it through some Joyce person at some conference, or somebody said that, and I goes, "That's good." So I'm supposed to say he allegedly, and I never do that. And then they go, he quit his Volta Cinema because it was failing, because all he was playing was Italian films and he wasn't a good businessman or whatever. But it is a good setup because of Faulkner saying, because you're willing to say it is a curse that we're. So you're saying basically that storytelling is hardwired in humans?
I think so, at least for the time being,
Yeah.
unless we change into cosmic beings at some point, which
Yeah.
might happen. Then perhaps we don't need narratives anymore because we experience everything.
Yeah.
But I like this kind of limitation because it's exciting.
Well, dude, you are such an exciting guy. I was like that. This reviewing of my interviews to do part 2 is all new over the last year. I would just do them, and then I'd go, okay, now my memory's going. I forgot all the good stuff. And I mean, when I reviewed ours, I was like just bowled over how much. What you touched on there was exactly what Peter Greenaway said. Cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. So cinema is only 130 years old. Well, he tells a story maybe in a different way. He's a great filmmaker, but this other great filmmaker, Andrew Noren, says if you put one frame next to another, that's narrative. So it's fussy about how what words we choose. So this guy who went to school with Bob Dylan I interviewed, and then he became a religious guy, and he told me that someone told him that the difference between narrative and storytelling, that there's a difference. So I'm just curious if you think there's a difference. And here's the line he said: narrative doesn't lie.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And then the last guy I talked to, Moritz, just to confuse it more, he said, no, storytelling lies and narratives is the truth. So any thoughts on the difference between storytelling and narrative? Is there a difference?
Of course there is. I think the idea of narrative doesn't lie. I would translate it because we create the narrative, and it's impossible for us to consciously lie to ourselves. We do this, of course. We lie to ourselves all the time, but we create narratives to not realize that we are lying to us. So it always seems to us as truth, what we experience. And I think that's what he means. I have lots of thoughts about what you just asked. I have also a wonderful quote, I don't get it exactly, from Peter Greenaway, which I love, where he said, like, there has been no film yet. You know this one? This is something that he said in the 80s, or like the film existed for 80 years. And he said, but the art form has not yet created a film. Yeah. It's not yet hasn't realized itself. Yeah, this was, of course.
Well, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, something like that. It was a very controversial statement. And of course, he's making movies at some point. But
just to interject, he did, in regards to Finnegan's Wake, he said the history of literature is this old. Yeah. The history of cinema, when he said this, was 120 years old. He said, if Finnegan's Wake is the pinnacle of literature, nothing in cinema has come close. And he said, Marty Scorsese is not doing anything different than D.W. Griffith. They're filming theater. That's all they're doing is filming there. Of course, there's difference because the angles and the equipment or whatever. But sorry to interrupt, because I like what you're saying. The last thing is I saw an interview with a guy today who said, honest liar. So you're sort of saying narrative is honest lying. It can be.
It seems honest to ourselves because the narrative is always our own. Yeah. If other people, and this is what happens today all the time, that people try to control the narrative, but the narrative is something like, it's like something that people ingest, and then they think it's their own narrative. So I hope I'll make that clear somehow.
But then what is the difference with storytelling? How is storytelling different than that?
Because the storytelling leaves the listeners intact. It doesn't try to influence them if it's good storytelling. For me, storytelling is a sacred art. And the good storyteller creates an exciting story. He creates a lot of images and fantastic ideas, whatever. The ideal storyteller is Scheherazade in Arabian Nights. Yeah, that's the archetypical storyteller. Endless imagination, endless fantasy, endless creativity. Yeah, the stories never end. She can always continue the story. And if there's a kind of happy end, then a demon will appear and abduct Sindbad or something. Yeah, so it's always continuing. But the storytelling that I love is leaving me intact as a person. It doesn't try to create a narrative that I then have to adhere to. You know, this is why I'm very wary, even though, of course, I adore the art and the artistry. But I'm very wary of the art of, for example, Leni Riefenstahl or something. Yeah, you know, the famous Olympic films, yeah, in Nazi times. Yeah, and that is, of course, creating not a story, but it's creating a narrative that makes me believe in the greatness of the Nazi Empire. And any art that is in the service of this kind of not storytelling, as in the joy of storytelling, but storytelling that is instrumentalized to become a narrative, that for me is something that I see as extremely critical.
That is
this is for me the difference between narrative and storytelling. Storytelling is sacred. Storytelling is our imagination. Storytelling is the wild space.
Yeah, is the wild space. Yeah,
it's the wild space, and it leaves me intact. It leaves my individuality intact. That's, I think, the main thing. It perhaps even strengthens it. Yeah, because it empowers me with ideas, with crazy things. You know, I mean, Finnegan's Wake. When you quote that book, you know, it's a book that's already pretty old. You know, I mean, it's
39.
Still, people are talking about it. They are analyzing. They are quoting sentences. They're trying to make sense of it somehow. Yeah. And what a great achievement this is!
Oh, it's
fantastic! It's like a communal experience. We were experiencing Finnegan's Wake communally as mankind for 100 years.
And it will be forever. But it's funny because this project. There's so many projects. I was like, I want to work with Moritz, man. I want to hire you. And the one is you brought up Scheherazade. That's Arabian Nights, 1001. What's it called?
It's Laila Valaila. So the 1001 Nights, I think.
Okay, that is a huge part of Finnegan's Wake. Joyce was highly influenced. So he wrote 100 letter words in the Wake, and he calls them thunders, and the last one isn't 100 letters, it's 101 letters. And it's literally, it's the history of technology. So it's funny you brought that up because the great filmmaker Hollis Frampton said this: narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Now, that's an interesting comment, but I'm going to ask you a question that I formed from that comment. Can you forget to die?
That would be great, no? Forgetting to die and then live on.
Yeah.
I would love that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this last time, you know.
Did I ask you that question last time? Tried
not that particular question, but I always love the idea, you know, of the Greek philosophers where, you know, where death is, I am not, and where I am, there's no death, you know. So it's not possible to really forget death or experience death because it's either one or the other. When you're dead, you cannot think about death anymore. Yeah. So it's a paradox in a way. And the mystery might be that because it's a paradox, it doesn't really exist, and we can forget about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I love paradoxes. You know, this is.
It's the essence. I mean, that's the main thing Frank Zappa taught me, is how to embrace contradiction. And McLuhan is you mean my whole fallacy is wrong. It's like, how do you embrace that? Because when you called, storytelling and narrative a curse, that's like, well, no, we don't want to call it a curse, but then you can suss it out, and it's just a jumping off point to dig deeper into how it's shaping our behavior, you know.
Yeah.
And how, so I know you're well documented in texts and on YouTube videos telling the history of how you got your interest in pursuing music as your calling. So I don't want to go too much into that, but I want to go into music now. But I did want to ask you to just summarize, because one of the things that most intrigued me about part one was your interest in holding your ear to the window of the car and hearing the white noise. So if you could help me, what is white noise, what is pink noise, and what is brown noise? Is there other colors, or is it generally just the adjective applies before for white, before the word noise?
Yeah, in acoustics, white noise is the all-encompassing noise. It's like it contains all sounds, basically.
Yeah.
And that's why you cannot listen to one sound anymore. It has everything in it. It's like gray or something, like, or smudge, where you have all the colors inside, you know. So, and there's nothing there anymore. But because it is like that, then you can work with white noise, and your brain can create oral pictures, or whatever we can call them, in this white noise. You can project your inner hearing into the white noise. You might try this out, because there are a lot of kitchen appliances and household appliances which create white noise. A washing machine could create some kind of white noise, or you know, your hair dryer. and when you imagine, I mean, you are a musical person, you love music, and you know a lot about music, and then put your hairdryer to your ear, and then imagine Frank Zappa and a certain song, and then you will start hearing that song in the white noise of the hairdryer. You will hear it as a real performance of that song, but it's actually a projection of your brain into the white noise.
Yeah.
And this is something, I mean, I didn't know all these things when I was a kid, but I reconstructed what I did, because I love doing that. I love putting my ear to the car window, because I could hear the whole White Album of the Beatles from the end, which I loved as a kid. You know, I'm a big Beatles fan, and the White Album was sacred to me when I was 4 years old. You know, so I could hear it completely. I didn't understand the English text and everything, but I could hear the music, and I thought it was like a miracle. And I think these things made me a composer in a way, because I experienced the miracle of music very innocently, without knowing anything about it. But
you didn't see Copland or some great conductor or composer and go, that's what I want to be. You found it through your car window. But is there things, do they use the word pink and brown before noise also? Or I've never heard that, but somehow I don't think you brought it up, but then I looked up white noise and they mentioned pink noise and brown noise. Have you heard of that?
I think I did hear it, but I'm not electronics, acoustics.
Okay.
Probably there is some deeper meaning to it, but I would have to look it up.
No worries, because you actually anticipated one of my biggest music questions. In 1969, the LA Free Press in LA interviewed Frank Zappa and said, you mentioned Pauline Oliveros. You know this person? Yeah. Okay. She worked with sound above the audible and below, creating a mass. And Frank, you said you like that. And then Frank said, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It created a sum indifference tone, which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle you could hear. Whether you like what you heard in the middle is another question. The concept's brilliant. So can you suss that out? What is Frank saying there? Any thoughts on that?
I think he was talking about, I mean, there's a phenomenon in acoustics where you have like phantom resonances. that might be what he means here. I didn't completely understand it, but I can guess. There's a moment in Atmosphere by George Ligeti, the famous orchestra piece, where the piccolo flutes, I think he uses 4 piccolo flutes, they play like in the highest possible register of the acoustic range that we can hear as humans. And they play very, very close notes in the highest register. And I was always amazed. I had the record, of course, of 2001, A Space Odyssey with a Karajan recording, and I listened to it endlessly when I was a teenager. And I was astonished that when I played this record on my record player, I could hear bass sounds when the piccolo flutes were playing these clusters. And this is an acoustic effect. So you have like phantom resonances because your brain assembles the overtone and creates an imaginary bass tone to the overtones you are hearing. And that sounds, on this Karajan recording on the 2001 soundtrack, it really sounds like a moan coming from, from hell or whatever. It's like, I could hear these really low bass sounds, and I was super, super fascinated by this. And of course, you have effects like this even very subtly in chamber music. When you place instruments in certain ranges, you will fill in the middle range. For example, if you have, let's say, if you have the piano playing relatively low and the violin relatively high, the middle register will still be there because it is filling with overtones that are not actually played, but they are audible. They come as a sum of all these notes that are played. And I think this is what Frank meant, something like this. And because Pauline Oliveras, I mean, she has this, of course, this very meditational, deep listening approach to music. That perhaps is something that she experimented with, like with long held notes, and that you hear these frequencies, and yeah.
It's really good. One really heavy hardcore musician knows everything said bullshit. When I read that to him, he just said bullshit. Some people go, yeah, kind of. But one thing, I like what you said. There's 2 things. One is, that's what someone said. That's what air conditioners do. When you said appliances in your kitchen, your hair dryer, they say they hit a sound so high and so low that you can't hear the air conditioner going. So I mean, that was sort of funny because that's what McLuhan calls the resonating interval. It's the in-betweenness.
Yeah.
And tactility isn't your hand touching your hand. It's the in-between space not touching.
And I'm not kidding. Sometimes I have my notebook for musical ideas, and when I sit like in front of a building site where you have a lot of white noise, or I'm sitting in front of a washing machine, so I sometimes hear melodies and strange musical ideas. Yeah. I notate them. It's true. Sometimes I find inspiration in these noises, really, honestly.
That's amazing. Because that's like the thought. All the music's in the world happening. We're just taking it down. We don't compose music. It's already there.
No, we don't compose anything. Everything is there. The potential of everything is there, of course.
Yeah.
We're just riding the wave. We're just riding the wave, and we see something. We're like surfers on the white noise.
Oh, that's funny because McLuhan was the first one to say surfing for Heidegger in his book, and then it became a computer term. I'm surfing the web. But another thing, we show black and white film off a DVD player on a white screen at our art gallery years ago. And then I call them Ben Gay dots. Then in the black and white pattern on their sweater or in a wall, you would see color. I says, how can you see color? That's a black and white film, and it's black and white, but we see color. So I think it's what you're saying, imagining it. People told me, no, that color doesn't exist. Your eye is creating it.
Yeah, I'm sure these things happen. And of course, there's a lot of neural research about how blind people perceive colors, for example, or deaf people hear sounds still, it's like phantom phantom events in their brain, because the brain is wired to have this kind of input.
Yeah.
And the organs don't function, but the brain functions. And of course they see colors in their dreams. Of course they have some kind of musical experience. Yeah.
Phantom resonance really clarified that Zappa thing. Thank you. So a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a Moritz song? Not an assignment. You know, not a commission, or you know what I mean. It's just like you're just writing something. What role does intention play?
These are great quotes, Gerry, and this is a great question also, because this is exactly the topic I'm researching with my students at the moment. Intention. What is intent in composition? And the main problem I encounter, I mean, that my students encounter, because they are still learning the craft, is very often that they have an intention, but it's not, they don't know. I mean, the result is something different. And so this creates, perhaps this is what Kubrick talked about, you know, if you know the intention, if you see the intention, perhaps it was boring to him. But the strange thing is, with Kubrick, I can see the intention a lot, you know.
For him to say that, people go
very, very aware of, I mean,
very intention, yeah.
Really, but there's a mystery to what it means.
Yeah.
But its intention is clear. And I would like to go back to our narrative discussion, because, of course, in the meantime, a great artist that I love very much died, David Lynch. And I give him always as an example, because the weird thing about good David Lynch films is that they have a narrative, but you don't know what the heck it is about. Right. Every moment of the film, you are transfixed because something is happening that you think you follow. But the meaning of it all is very mysterious. I mean, try to give a short summary of what's happening in Mulholland Drive. Yeah. It's impossible. Yeah, it's a very complicated film. But you have a scene in Drive-In. Somebody is scared of something happening in the back of this Drive-In, and then he goes there. He sees something horrible. He has a heart attack. He dies. So that's a narrative. But in the film, it's a complete mystery what the scene means. Yeah. But while you see the scene, you follow it because it has a story. It has a story. Somebody is scared. And there are many moments like this in Mulholland Drive. Something happens and you know what's happening. Somebody's entering a room, having a conversation. It's the characters have they have something, that they have goals. They have things that they strive for. But what does it mean in the end? What does Shining by Stephen King, filmed by Stanley Kubrick, mean actually? What does this film mean? I don't know, but it's extremely fascinating to watch. Yeah, and so now going back to the intent question, what I try to do is I believe in the strength of something that I cannot put into words. I believe in the meaning between the lines, the meaning between the notes. I absolutely believe in that. I believe also that I do things intuitively that perhaps are meaningful, but I don't know what the meaning is. But to create a piece of music, to create what you asked, like a song, I have to be aware of my intent all the time. I have to be, you know, what do I want to achieve in this passage of music? What is the thing that the listeners will perceive as my intent? I have to be very, very aware of that. And that's what, for students, very often is a big problem, because they have all these big ideas. They have perhaps like complex systems, how to create music. They have serial, you know, rows of notes or whatever, and they create something, but the result is something different. And my favorite example of this is a piece of Stockhausen. I don't even remember the exact name. Perhaps we talked about it last time, but this is an example I always give to my students. This is a piece by Stockhausen which appears in the lecture that he gave for the BBC. This is a long lecture that you can find on YouTube. You just Google BBC lectures Stockhausen. And he's talking at length about a piece where he's exploring extreme pitches. Like he wants like really high notes and then really low notes. And he wants to connect these extremely distant pitches through various instruments in a very clever way. And he's talking about this on a chalkboard. He's making graphs and explaining his system. So he's explaining basically his intent. And then, to the great surprise of the people listening to him, he's then playing the piece. And the one thing that you hear in this piece is a bongo. Because it's a piece for ensemble. So you have high flutes, you have low double bass. But a bongo is constantly playing these rhythms in the middle. And the reason for this is because Stockhausen, as I'm a composer, I can feel what he felt when he was composing it. So he probably thought, okay, these dry pitches are a bit boring. So I need some kind of rhythm to cheer it up a little, to make it a bit more exciting for the audience. And now, because you have all this space in the middle, and you have these high pitches and these low pitches, but the bongo player is now, of course, in the center of attention, and it becomes the main thing of the piece. Every person who listens to this piece only hears the bongo. And it's not about this intent that he originally had. And this is Stockhausen, who was, he was very, very clever. He was not a stupid person.
I think
this is a typical example for me of somebody who has a strong intent, but is failing to bring his intent across.
Amazing. I got to react for a couple of moments. One is, I heard that Stockhausen said he's from outer space. Did you ever hear it? There's three people who claim that I believe them. Stockhausen, Sun Ra, and the guy who wrote the song 96 Tears. He's an Hispanic dude from Saginaw, Michigan. You know the song 96 Tears, Ruby. Look up 96 Tears. You've heard it. It's one of the greatest 60s hits, 96 Tears. And those three people claim they're from outer space. I'm not a UFO kind of guy, but those three people, I believe it. I don't doubt it. But anyways, I'm so glad you told me that, because it opened up that whole idea of intention to the point that I think you're talking a lot of what I learned from studying McLuhan. And he said, in order to understand me, you have to know all of Joyce and all the symbolists. And Mallarmé, one of the best symbolist poets, said, don't paint the painting, paint the effect you want to have.
That's a very good quote. Yeah.
So that's why Dylan, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Patti Smith, they're all symbolist wannabes. And that's what Stockhausen, or you explained, is you're explaining that. Then to go back to the Kubrick for a second, when you brought up The Shining, have you ever seen Room 237?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I've interviewed 6 people involved in that film with all these stupid questions, and it's such an amazing thing, because they never show them talking heads. It's a collage film, and people go, "What's your favorite Kubrick film?" And I go, "Room 237," because every of the 13 Kubrick films is in 237, and it's such an amazing thing, because it's like, that's stupid. You don't see Kubrick's face in the clouds. That guy is one of the greatest Kubrick scholars in the world who said that. Anyways, that is so heavy what you said about intention. Now, you touched on the follow-up question, and I'm curious your thoughts. Duchamp said there's no art without audience. How much are you thinking of your listener when you're writing your song?
I'm not thinking of the listener, because I'm not the listener. I'm not all people on this planet. I'm not other individuals. So it would be preposterous to pretend I know how every person on this planet will listen to my music. But I'm imagining a listener. I don't know how else to put it. So not the listener, but a listener. And of course, the first listener of my music is myself.
Yeah.
And I have a working method when I compose, that I usually, when I start working every day, I revisit, like you revisited your interviews. So you work very similar to me. I revisit everything that I've written before. I make it a habit of listening to it either by MIDI or in my head or whatever. But I start the piece from the beginning and I go to the spot where I am. If it's a longer piece, of course, it doesn't make sense to listen to 1 hour of music before I even start writing. But I will listen to at least 5 minutes, 6 minutes of music. I will just try to find myself as much in the state of somebody listening to it as possible. And then I ask myself the question, okay, what would I now enjoy happening?
Yeah.
And of course, this is hypothetical. I cannot be everybody. And what I enjoy is not what everybody enjoys. But let's face it, if I don't enjoy it, then nobody else will enjoy it, for sure. Yeah, this is what we talked about last time. Ray Bradbury's quote, you have to write what you love.
Yeah.
Only write what you love. Because if you don't love it, then it really doesn't make no sense to write it down. Yeah, this might be embarrassing. It might be trite. It might be cliche, whatever. But if you love it, then there's a reason to write it down. Because love fuels the storytelling. Of course, love fuels the storytelling. Which brings us back to Scheherazade, which is also a love story, as we know. Yeah. So, okay. But I then revisit all of this, and then I try to find something that I would enjoy, and then I do mostly that. Or I think about what would the listener expect now, and then I do the opposite. Because if I fulfill what the listener would expect, I will bore him. Whereas when I surprise him or her, of course, it might be more exciting. So this is something that I always do, and I always work linear. So I never. Some composers they assemble material like a collector, and then they put it in some order that they like at some point. Yeah. So they have this idea, and then at some point they make a puzzle, and then that's the piece. I always work from moment to moment to moment to moment. So it's like I'm editing a film. I have all this material, but then I start editing the film from the start to the end. And so I always try to that's I'm very, very aware of timing issues. Is it boring? Does it go too long? And so I can only find this if I really always revisit what I have written the day before and then continue from there. That's my working method.
That is so brilliant. And again, you're so articulate. 3 things came up. One is the McLuhan line that I quoted today, and it's so appropriate. You just actually quoted it without knowing, maybe. He said, carefully make plans, then do the opposite.
Yeah, I know this. Yeah, but this is a good quote.
Hard. That's hard to do because we want to fall back on it. And then my wife's a pro jazz singer, and she's sung for decades. And for 20, 30 years, she would never listen to any tapes, any replay back, because she was a live artist. She played Carnegie Hall. Now she watches herself on the cell phone, and she's just smiling and beaming. But I know what she's doing is going. She's very fussy. Like, don't put that clip on YouTube. She's really learning, and it's a training. It's a training tool.
Yeah.
And then here's the follow-up question. Frank Zappa says, I make music for myself. If other people like it, that's a bonus. But I think in his situation, I think he's a little over romanticizing it. And I wasn't able to talk to him about this, and I could be completely wrong, but he lives in a consumer culture, and he knew because he was peddling his first songs, because he knew his orchestral music wasn't going to make money. So he started making rock music that was like orchestral music. Like his bodyguard said, I like Frank because it's not like Moody Blues using an orchestra and enhance their rock. His bodyguard said, no, I like Frank because he makes a rock band sound like an orchestra. And so Frank knew peddling his music in the early 60s. Oh, I'm going to go to Hollywood and try to sell this song. So he knew if he hit these notes and these chords that kids would buy his music, then he could make more. So do you think there's a little of that when we live in a consumer culture, that people make music and they know that it sounds a little over romanticized, or am I being too tough on him?
Yeah, this is a big topic, Gerry, and I'm thinking about it a lot. The strange thing is that your example, Zappa, is, I mean, we all know that he had this lucky breaks with songs like Bobby Brown or something, which he
Yeah, but he didn't make money off
to have a.
But wait, he did make a living playing rock and roll music. That's the thing.
He did make a living, but I absolutely admire him for always being himself, basically.
Yeah.
You know, even in Bobby Brown, it's not like he puts on a mask and is something completely different, which some people do.
Yeah.
But he has this kind of irony and this wit that is apparent throughout his work. Yeah. And it's and if you are not completely dumb, you hear the song and you know he's making fun of pop music. Yeah. He's making fun of it, at the same time. But it's also brilliantly done. And I also love his parodies of Beach Boys or whatever, which he has in all his work.
He parodied everybody. He parodied all his heroes. Yeah. He parodied what he loved. But it is funny.
I'm absolutely sure that if he had wanted with his talent and with his skill, he could have been a very ordinary pop star.
But he said there is one quote, I can't find it, but this guy who's taught Zappa in a university of Indiana for 40 years, he teaches Zappa the Beach. You know, he teaches music. He said, Frank said once, I think all my songs are hits. So he's still in that realm, because when he hired the LSO to play his orchestral music and they didn't play it right, all he could do is bitch. He goes, they didn't play it right. And then as he's dying, he hires the Stockhausen's house band. No, he doesn't hire. The Stockhausen house band comes to him and says, we'll play your music. You tell us. So he got lucky at the end of his life, you know, but you know, I still think there's a little over romanticizing that. It's just my own little quirky thing, you know.
Yeah, but he's a very rare example of somebody who kept his individuality and his artistic vision intact. Yeah. While at the same time somehow surviving in a capitalist society. Yeah. Which is, I mean, kudos to him, you know. I mean,
it is kudos. And there's two quotes that apply. A punk magazine in LA where everybody was spawned, Flipside, the editor, Reverend Al, said, don't sell out, sneak in. Yeah. And the other one is Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver and a bunch of films. Yeah. He said, the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail. Now that's funny, but it's also flipped. Oh, my art is so pure. I tried to sell out, but I failed. Like, give me a break. There's nothing wrong.
That's right. The really good artists fail at selling out. Some try, but if they are good, they fail. Yeah. There are many in music history. There are many examples. There might be Hugo Wolf, for example, is a good. It's a good case in point. Yeah, he wanted.
How do you spell that?
Hugo Wolf is like one of the great lead composers of the late Romantic era.
But how do you spell his name? I'm not getting it.
Like Wolf. Hugo Wolf.
Oh, Hugo Wolf. Okay, I got to look him up.
Okay. Because famous, you know, we wanted to be this famous lead composer, and he wrote this long song cycles, and he wanted that they would sell and that people would play them like the songs of Schubert, who also failed to sell out, you know.
Really? Wow.
And Hugo Wolf failed miserably because his songs were so weird and so strange and so, you know, so completely different from everything else. And he was unhappy all his life. But his legacy is great, you know.
Yeah.
The music legacy is fantastic.
It's like like in part one, you bringing up the Shags. I shit a brick. I was like, this guy's bringing up the Shags to me. And it's like, they probably didn't even know what selling out was. They're the most pure ever. But you know,
the biggest asset. The purity of the Shags is amazing.
Yeah. And McLuhan is interesting because he was just a literature. He was just a poet, you know, a literature guy. And the guy, a guy called him up and says, dude, I read your book. I can make you famous. I'll give you $5,000. And he goes, sure, go ahead. And he's this literature guy who got on the cover of Newsweek magazine, he's not pro TV. They say he's the new guru of the media. And so he kind of snuck in, but he did, okay, give me some money. And he that's why he's thought of as a charlatan in the long run, and people sort of discount him. And he said that everything we invent extends some humanness, like a human sensorium. So like the knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera extends our eyelid, and maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. Is your main instrument piano?
Yeah.
What does the piano extend for you? What humanness?
Yeah, I was naturally drawn to the piano because it is a very tactile instrument which has a lot of limitations but can do everything. I think what drew me to the piano was when I was a kid, somebody said to me, there's violin, there's flute, there's harp, whatever, but the piano can be all these instruments. And it's the most versatile instrument where you can pretend to be something. It's a storytelling instrument, actually. The piano is the perfect storytelling instrument. And the greatest pianists are storytellers, for sure. Yeah. Michelangelo, Władysław Richter, Glenn Gould, they're all storytellers in their own way. And the piano is the most uninteresting instrument, actually, because it is like a percussion instrument. It has limited scope. The sound is immediately gone. You can use a bit of pedal. So everything you do on the piano is actually make-believe. It's make-believe I'm a string instrument. It's make-believe I'm an orchestra. It's make-believe I'm a singer. And this schools you in being also a composer, but also a storyteller. Yeah. And this is why still historically it's absolutely necessary for composers, for all composers, even if they are guitarists or whatever, to know at least a little piano. And as a teacher, I can immediately tell if a composer comes from the piano or if he's coming from the violin or something, because the pianists think differently. They think polyphonically. I always say to my students, I can hear if it's a violinist composing, the music basically is monophonic. It might have chords or anything, but it's always one line. A lot of contemporary music is actually monophonic. It sounds very complicated, but it's actually just one line, one complicated line, like I described in Stockhausen. A complicated line going up and down, but there's no polyphony like in Bach. And when you come from the piano, when you train as a pianist from an early age on, you learn that your fingers all of them have I show them to the camera, all of them have an independent life, So you play a chord. Like a good jazz pianist, okay, this finger goes here, this finger goes here, and it will sound nice. And then this finger goes here, and then this finger goes here. And this is the polyphony. This is polyphony on the piano. It's also make-believe, because, of course, your fingers aren't independent. You can pretend that they are individuals. Yeah. But if you are a really good pianist, which I wouldn't dare myself to call, but the better you are, the better your fingers are individuals, and you can bring out a line with your little finger or with your thumb or whatever. And all of this is make-believe. All of this is not really happening. If I'm a violinist, I can have a forte, I can go like this, and it's really a physical act. On the piano, you can do this, but what is it? It's just hammers transmitting your force into a machine. Yeah. It's not
beautiful. Yeah. More, it's so beautiful, because I grew up with the piano in our basement. My sister was taking lessons. I never took lessons. My mom let me take drum lessons for a little, and then when she heard a drum set, she goes, no way. So we didn't have a drum set. So I sort of self-taught myself how to bang on the piano by playing Louie Louie. One song for I still play it for 5 decades. So I taught myself how to improvise like Keith Jarrett by playing Louie Louie. And sometimes when I play, I do like fake Cecil Taylor, but I always turn around and set my butt on the keys because that's what Sun Ra did.
Yeah.
And in this woman from Belgium, she's a great jazz pianist, and we did this session together. And I says, okay, use your butt, and she goes, no, well, it hurt my butt. But here's the you have ESP, and that was beautiful because when they asked McLuhan, what do films extend? He said, what human is? He said, the foot, because it travels. So what you said was the piano extends the human's need or want to do storytelling and make believe. So that was really beautiful. The humanness came out. Now, this is Ravi Shankar in 1956. Mm-hmm. For better enjoyment of Indian music, Western audience should forget about harmony and counterpoint and mix tone colors and relax rather in the rich melody and rhythm. Yeah. Okay, now that's the setup for the next question. Copeland says the 4 elements or ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. I know there's more, but let's just go on those 4. The first question is, what is tone color in non-academic terms?
We use the word timbre.
I know, but that's an academic term. Yeah, yeah.
But that's tone color essentially. It's so tone is, if you go to a electronic instrument, if you use a theremin, you have the most pure form of a tone. It's the sinus wave. Yeah, it's like just the tone. Yeah, it's like what you hear, what an electronic instrument produces, or an analog synthesizer. This is the essence. This is a tone. And then, as you know, the first analog synthesizers, they use these different kinds of waves, like square, saw, the different forms of waves. And this is already where we enter the realm of timbre. So you have the tone, this is a C, this is an A, this is an F, but then you have the quality of sound for this note. And this is influenced by the waveform. And once you explore acoustic instruments, you really understand that they are built to create a very, very specific timbre, a very specific tone color. So the sound of the note A on the trumpet is very, very different from the sound of A on the clarinet.
Yeah.
Even though it is the same note.
Yeah.
And I would love to find an equivalent in literature, because in literature you have words, but it's always the same word. But perhaps you have a font, you have a presentation. It's either a handwritten word or it's a printed word. It's whatever, And it will, perhaps if you read the text, it will influence the way you read it. And of course, you know that many great poets already thought about this. There's even an example in Renaissance literature, a book that I'm working on at the moment for preparing for an opera, the Hypnerotomachia Polifilio. I don't know if you know this famous Renaissance book by Francisco Colonna. So this is a book where a very important Renaissance text, where also they experimented with, having like the text begin in a certain font that was actually invented for the book, and then every line is a bit shorter, so it narrows down. It becomes like a cone or something, And so they experimented with how does the text visually reach the reader, and this is perhaps the equivalent to timbre in music.
Brilliant, brilliant, because no one's ever.
If I orchestrate, I know that these different timbres have different emotional meanings, and the typical cliches of film music is if it becomes emotional, strings come in. If it becomes like more somber or ponderous, perhaps the clarinet will come in. If it's heroic, it will use brass, trumpets, trombones, whatever. These are the typical cliches of film music. But of course, you can subvert them. You can do something completely the opposite. So it would be interesting to do a very romantic scene with a brass ensemble, and then have, I mean, a great composer like Bernard Herrmann managed to have the strings in Psycho, you know, the famous music, being basically percussive instruments, and like subverting the role, you know, having the strings play the most unromantic music, like horror music. And this is, of course, his great skill in instrumentation and using unusual and interesting timbres of the strings.
Yeah. Moritz, no one ever did that. Well, what's the literature comparison to what tone color is? So that really was helpful, because that's what concrete poetry is. They arrange it in, so they took that Renaissance book you mentioned. And
a contemporary example that many of your viewers will know is House of Leaves, of course. Mark Danielewski. You probably heard about this book. Yeah, he also works very, very consciously with fonts, with graphic design, and it's brilliant, actually.
Yeah. Well, actually, my understanding is Wyndham Lewis was the first to use different fonts in his magazine Blast, but it's not who's first. But there's a guy I just interviewed for the second time, and I would love to do a salon with you and him and a couple others. You know Henning Lohner? He worked with Hans Zimmer. He made the best documentary on John Cage. He's got a doc on Xenakis and on Stockhausen. He made the doc on Stockhausen. You must have seen it. Anyways, Henning is an amazing guy, and he touched on a lot of what you were talking about, because just working for Hans Zimmer for 20 years, it's like, you know, then you just cut to the chase. You went Bernard Herrmann. It's like, that's all you have to say. When you say film music, if you don't say Bernard Herrmann, it's like, that guy was so pure, in my opinion, because he did. Everybody goes, dude, you're way better in film music. He goes, nope, I'm just film music. You know, he kind of was humble in a way, I'm saying, and he found his calling. But the four ingredients that Copland distinguished: melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. I never found the exact way to ask this, but I kind of will ask it the way I do. How do you integrate? How do you know what to focus? Do you have a favorite? Do you have a ritual? Is there any way you can distinguish those four in communicating to me your composing practice?
I can, because there's a fifth element that Copland is missing, and that is, for me, gesture. Because the musical gesture is what combines all these things, because tone color in itself is nothing. Rhythm in itself, I mean, you're a drummer, but it is enhanced through color. If you play a drum set, if you just play a rhythm like with electronic sounds, and it's like something like this, it would be boring very quickly. But if you play a drum set, you take, of course, great care in tuning your tom-toms and using the right cymbals, and you're using all these different tone colors. So the rhythm that you play becomes polyphonic. So you're already using several elements. And the surpassing element of all of this is the gesture, where I combine all these things: harmony, melody, tone color, rhythm, in one syllable, in one word, perhaps. Yeah. And I strongly believe that music has a grammar. You were talking about Indian music a bit before, and Indian music, as you know, has a very, very strict grammar, actually. It has very strict rules how to transition from one improvisation to the next, what signals the musicians use to know how to proceed in the improvisation. And so these gestures become the encompassing thing. The tabla player will play a certain rhythm, and then all the others know, okay, this is like the grammar, this is the word that he says now. And we have great examples in contemporary music that are very similar. For example, you have Steve Reich, 18 musicians, there's always this signal in the vibraphone, which signals now there's a new transition to the next phase, and then there will be a new build-up of a melody. And he uses this to establish a grammar, to establish a language for this piece that at some point the audience intuitively understands. They might not be able to explain it in the same words that I use, because my profession is music, and I don't expect the people who listen to my music to have my profession. but they intuitively will understand that I work with certain gestures and with certain things, perhaps also with repetition to a certain extent, that they will hopefully understand the grammar that I'm creating, understand the language that I'm creating. So the gesture is the decisive element. I'm never thinking of individual things like rhythm and so on, but I always think of the grand total. I'm thinking of how do I combine them into a storytelling. Yeah.
Wow. Who did you learn that from? Did you make that up, or is there someone you studied with, or a previous music person taught you that gesture combines all four of those?
I think I basically learned all of this from my students because I constantly have to explain to them. And then while explaining to them, I remember these thoughts. I understand how I actually do work because I have to, in a way, explain to them how I compose. And finding these words to explain to others makes me think about these things. But of course, I had also great teachers who were addressing these things. And I think one of the influential voices in my head when I'm talking about gesture is a composer like Wolfgang Riem. I don't know if you know his name, but he's like a very, very famous German contemporary composer who passed away last year. And he was always talking about, he called it, and this is a German word, which I can't translate. I tried very often to translate it to English students, but it's Setzung. And this means, if you translate it, it means like something very similar to placement, but it actually means that you put something there with intent, with intention. And this brings us back to our former topic. And this Setzung is already a gesture.
Wow.
Yeah?
How do you spell that word?
Setzung, Setzung. This is a very unusual German word that only Wolfgang Riem used incessantly. I mean, he was a brilliant, brilliant person. And he had fantastic ways of putting his very intellectual thoughts into words. And so this always impressed me. And I'm always, if I describe this to my students, I always use analogies like, like a theater space, and how does an actor do something on stage that transmits to the audience. And in a way, in some ways you have to exaggerate because you have to speak louder than you would normally speak in a normal conversation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to make it sound naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the great art of good actors. Yeah. The bad actors, they just scream all the time, but the good actors will speak loud, but it sounds like they're speaking softly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are similar techniques in music to do that, but you have to be very conscious of how you place this, how you do the Setzung, and really this comes from Wolfgang Riem, I think, mainly. Yeah.
Moritz, just one quick divert. How many years have you been teaching about, just generally? How many years you been teaching?
I think it's now 25 years or so. Yeah.
And how many years have you been composing music about?
I mean, the first compositions I would be happy with come from when I was like 15 or 16, when I was starting writing music for my prog rock band, I have to add.
So how many years is that about? Just a guess.
I became 60 2 months ago, so it's 45 years of creating music.
Composing about 45.
I did compose, but when we were talking about white noise, so I feel like I was composing since I was 4 or so, because I had music in my head.
Yeah.
There are actually compositions also that I try to write down somehow. Yeah. But because I wasn't really planning on becoming a musician, I wanted to be a filmmaker, actually. So I never really thought of myself as a composer, but I had music in my head all the time. And I have it right now, and I have it every day from morning to evening. I have music in my head. Yeah. And so if you count that, it's probably a bit longer.
Yeah. But it is pretty amazing. It's like 50 years composing, 25 years teaching, and you're still composing. Okay. So now My friend says the 3 T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. Technique, you learned how to play the piano. Theory, you learn the structures. How does one acquire taste?
Wow. I wish more people would acquire it, you know.
But dude, you're the guy who says the shags in the next to Stockhouse or you know these amazing people, and if you put the shags on at a party, people will leave the party. But you've acquired a taste. You can say these, you could drop these names, but you could be saying Barry Manilow or Neil Diamond or you know Pink Panthers or whatever. But you've acquired taste, and it's not just you. But how does one? The way I word it is, how does one acquire taste?
That's a hard question. That's a hard question because taste is dominated by the times we are living in.
Yeah.
So the times we are living in, they force us to have a certain, to perceive certain things as tasteful and other things as tasteless. And this, of course, changes. Many things in our times would be considered completely tasteless to a person in the 50s. Yeah, and vice versa. There's a great moment in the show. I don't even know the name right now. I have a blackout.
That's all right. You'll come to you.
Well,
what happens?
The show with the advertising company.
Mad Men?
Mad Men, yeah. That's so stupid. Sorry. So, Mad Men. There's a great scene in Mad Men where they show the family and they're having a picnic and then they throw the whole cloth with all the trash and everything, all the food and everything. They just throw it on the side of the road and then they drive away.
Oh my God.
It's completely normal behavior in the 50s.
Yeah.
It was absolutely okay to just throw your trash somewhere on the highway, you know? It was, nobody would say this was tasteless.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was not yet this amount of pollution that we experience today. So people have become more aware of that. And now they find somebody throwing trash away, at least in Europe, it is considered extremely tasteless if you would do that. Yeah. And of course, the same things happen in music. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what Bach did was tasteless to his sons. They thought this whole counterpoint thing and this whole polyphony and fugues, they didn't like it. Whereas he probably thought what his sons were doing was tasteless because it was too simple, too brash, too, you know. So what is taste? I don't know. I think the role of art is not to have good taste, but is, yeah, now I find the right words. Our role is to question taste all the time and to explore the limits of taste. So this is where provocation comes from. And I always think that art, good art, always has an element of provocation because it will do something that goes beyond the taste of the times. It will either be a vision of the taste of the future, or it will be a radical reimagining of the taste of the past. And both of these will always kind of evoke some extreme reaction, either of hatred or of disgust, like in the premiere of Sacre du Printemps, which was, of course, a vision of the taste of the future, but which the audience of the time apparently found extremely tasteless. Not only the music, we have to add, because this is always forgotten, it was also the production and the naked dancers and the topic of, you know, sacrificing virgins on the stage and stuff like that. This was what people really found tasteless at the time. This was all a combo with the music. Yeah.
So well put, because it's like, I hate when parents say, I took my kid to their first rock concert, Pearl Jam. I was like, give me a break. Let them find their own music. But, you know, that's it changed because when I was growing up, our parents didn't like our music, and that gave us our identity. And like one friend of mine, his dad liked the Mothers of Invention because it had old, you know, vaudevillian kind of Dixieland jazz in one song. And it was like, whoa, that was like a freaky thing for kids. And now, you know, parents turn their kids, and then the kids, they might find their own music. But you touch, and you know, I go to NPR's Tiny Desk and Saturday Night Live, and I listen to 5 seconds. And it's like, sometimes I like, oh my God, this is amazing. I would have never found it. So it's like a new kind of way to expose things that you might never hear. And that's Igor Stravinsky said, most people don't know what they like what they know. So, you know, everybody just gets this certain amount, and then they don't know there's so much more. And you know, the proof was in Cage doing 433 in the 50s, and then it charted on the English pop charts 10 years. That's freaky. And then George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, says, what kind of music do you like? He goes, the kind that pisses me off. And I'm trying to figure out, why would this piss me off? How can music be bad? Music can't be bad, but we think, you know, there's good music and there's bad music because we form biases. Now this is Moritz. Go ahead and respond. I have one more taste question. Go ahead.
No, I was thinking, I mean, you're absolutely right, and I totally agree. To just sum it up, I think music or art has to challenge taste also. You know, and that is, if I hear something that is completely tasteful, I will be extremely bored.
Yeah.
Because it means that it succumbs to what the times expect. Yeah. And that is boring.
But it has, that reeks of guilty pleasure. So, you know, when we grew up, we didn't like the Carpenters. Now, like, Karen Carpenter's great. It's like, oh my God, that's, you know, it's like Barry Manilow or whatever. People want to put these like, well, you can't like that kind of music if you like this kind of music. And then you go, well, I have a guilty pleasure. I like it. You know, I mean, I grew up listening to Dionne Warwick sing Burt Bacharach songs and crying because of my teenage love affairs, and that will never leave me. It's like, you know, when they asked someone, what's the best era of science fiction writing? The 20s, the 40s, the 60s? And he goes, when you're a teenager.
Yeah.
So that's with music too. But most people answer, and you said it well, Moritz. I really appreciate you expanding on the norm of how these questions are usually answered. Most people go, how do you acquire taste? Exposure and experience. That's the two words they use. But yours was a little more like the times dictated, and you put it in. Here's the McLuhan quote that's got 2 parts to it that I'd love to hear your reactions. Song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Now, any thoughts on that? And there's like 2 parts. Usually people don't even hear the song is slow down speech. They go, that's not slow down speech. But, you know, he's talking poetic or metaphorical, but he's also saying something ultimately, which he normally doesn't. His idea was to come up with new questions and new metaphors. So he's basically saying this song is slow down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is connected to language difference. Any thoughts? Because I'm not saying he's right or wrong.
I think he's right, because as musicians, we all know that the language culture in which the music evolves will actually influence the way this music sounds. If you look at the history of opera, you will see that there is a certain quality of Italian opera that is absolutely connected to the way Italian is spoken. Yeah, if you listen to something, it could never be of something. It could never be a creation of a German composer. It's impossible. Yeah, but there's also a certain quality of Schumann songs or even the Wagner opera, which is absolutely German. Yeah, and no other culture would produce music like this. I'm not saying that it is better music, or
right, but do a little.
I love that it is different. I love that Indian music is as it is, because it is also very, very connected to the way the Indian language sounds.
But and do a little. Sorry to interrupt, but do a little. So I get it. You did that Italian so well, Italian opera. Do a thing above German to give me an example of how German speak in a German composer's piece, you know, that's known like that?
Yeah, I mean, he was German speaking. Schubert, if you have the Winterreise, fremd bin ich eingezogen, fremd zieh ich wieder aus. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's a typical German melody.
That is amazing. It sounded like you were quoting Zappa. He has a song called Sofa, and he sings, Ich bin die Chrome, die Net. He's saying, yeah, I mean, it really does. You captured it there. Thank you for doing that.
That's the Winterreise, yeah? And then you have, the French chanson, which is always like, it's like this. It's typical for the language. And now I have the great honor to at the moment, I have to study Swedish of all languages, because I have a commission to continue my song cycle Neue Dichterlieben, which was a continuation of the Schumann Dichterlieben, but with contemporary German authors. And now I'm setting to music Swedish contemporary authors. And I'm not Swedish and I don't speak Swedish, but I'm studying the language. And I see already that the compositions that I do change because I try to feel the Swedish language. Of course, I use my computer to have Google Translate or whatever read the Swedish in Swedish pronunciation to me. So I'm learning the very complex pronunciation of Swedish. And I can already see that the melodies I'm writing are different. They're different from the German melodies. They're not drastically different because Swedish is not that far from German. We have the same, there's the same language roots. So I can understand how they organize the sentences much better than how I can understand how Japanese organize the sentences. It's very different, yeah. But I love this. I love that languages are different. I love that the way we use languages make us perceive the world differently. And I just wish that we as humans would be in awe of this miracle of these different experiences of reality and learn from each other, because each of us, each different language has a very, very specific quality of experiencing reality and of course also of creating art and music. And this is wonderful. And my biggest fear for the future is that everybody will speak only one language and everything will be monocultural.
Monocultural.
It should be polycultural, of course. I love to experience cultures that I don't know. This is for me the biggest experience, to go somewhere I don't know the language, I don't know the culture, and I'm slowly learning how do they perceive the world, what are their rituals, what are their fascinations, and we can always learn from each other. This is why every drastic worldview where you want to just preserve your own cultural identity to the exclusion of all others will always fail, because it means death, in my opinion. It means always death.
Totally. It was like when the Bulgarian women's choir charted on the English pop charts. That was an amazing moment for all of us. And the Olatunji coming to America and playing African music way back before there was any world music. Yeah. And then tuba throat singers, Richard Feynman brought them, and they were in the Rose Bowl parade, and they were on Johnny Carson, and they were jamming in Zappa's basement studio. I mean, tuba throat singers is another. It's like, but Swedish. I'm going to introduce you to Mats and Morgan. They were two teenage kids who got to play with Zappa when they were teenagers. They just went to the concert and said, "Hey, we can play Tamirshi Deween." He goes, "No." "Okay, come on stage and play it." And they've been playing together for 40 years. And Mats is blind since birth, but he's like, Art Tatum on piano. Yeah. So I want to introduce you, because you should talk to him just about being in Sweden. Are you going to go to Sweden and play it and be there?
I'm writing this for a lead duo in Sweden, but I will surely go to Sweden to see.
Oh yeah, no, I want to introduce you to him.
A couple of times also.
You would love talking to Mats. It's amazing because he is. And now, what's more fundamental, language or music?
I think the experience of music comes first, so it might be more fundamental. What comes first is more fundamental because one builds upon the other.
Yeah.
And music is something that comes before language, because we know that there are animal species which use something that is very, very close to what we perceive as music now. I mean, the most famous example probably being birds, but there are also many other animal species which have mating calls and stuff like that. And that is music. They use certain tone sequences. Yeah, birds have very, very complex melodies, which Messiaen, as you know, loved and tried to transcribe. But this is music. Of course, this is music. Yeah, but this is before language. Birds don't speak, but they use these series of notes to communicate with each other in some way.
Yeah.
So music is probably the most fundamental thing. Music comes first, and then there's language.
Thank you for saying that, because Eric Dolphy and Sun Ra both said we listen to the crickets, and but isn't that more anthropomorphizing our word on animals? We don't speak animal language, so we put our word, oh, you're doing music, on them. They might not be doing music in their language.
Yeah, but I think we're still connected. I mean,
I think it's connected. Yeah.
So of course there's anthropomorphizing going on. We probably can understand mammals better than reptiles or insects, for sure. But we can still understand the fear of an ant. Yeah, it experiences fear as well. It might be threatened. Or a spider is threatened. It retreats into its web. So the emotions, even if they are not connected to an intelligence that we can understand, but it's a different kind of intelligence, but there are emotions, there are situations that we can understand. We can dive into the sea. We can see very weird creatures on the bottom of the ocean. There might be jellyfish, but there might be blind fish with stalks and there's an eye on top. But if they are threatened by a predator, they will run away. They will experience fear. So this is not anthropomorphization. It's we know what they feel. They're just a different species.
Yeah. So, but again, I love that. I agree with you. But it's also, we put our word fear on it. That when dogs are, that could be play. It could not be fear. It could be, we could put a different word on it. And if the fish or the animal could talk to us, they go, no, we're playing. You call it fear, but because they might eat us. So I understand what you're saying, and I think it's important. But I think I would love to, because we're at 90 minutes, and I'd love to do a part 3, and it could be like 6 months down the line, because I know you're a busy man.
No, I'd love to. I always.
No, I'm glad you said you love to, because I want to milk it, because I'm learning so much, and that's one of my big questions: is what's the function of music, and we can go into that. And I also want to, the process of learning. McLuhan has this great quote of what's the difference between entertainment and education. In the process of teaching for 25 years, how much has that fed into your composing and as well as articulating? So why don't we close out this part? And Moritz, I really appreciate this. Truly a delight. And it's just so enlightening for me. We could close out this one with, tell me the name of a song that makes you laugh. That's an instrumental. There's no words.
Oh, there are many. I could name many pieces by Erik Satie, which make me laugh because.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and they're purely instrumental.
Yeah. But isn't that a phenomenon? Isn't laughing basically come from words? So when I say, how can an instrumental make you laugh? I mean, I love Satie, and I totally agree. I always say Thelonious Monk, it's like, what? It makes you laugh. And a lot of people say the Benny Hill theme song.
Yeah.
But it's funny, how could a song
Yeah,
make
I have to say, I think I can pinpoint it.
yeah,
I have to laugh at an instrumental piece of music if it is outrageous in some way.
yeah,
And that is a quality that Satie achieved very often. My favorite example is probably Embryon Desséché, the dried up embryos,
yeah,
where he has this like very innocent beginning. It sounds a bit like Scarlatti and so on, and then like this short piece and a bit of this and that, and then there's this ending, and it's like da 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 da, and it just he repeats this chord. It has this endless ending, which is completely out of proportion to the music before, and that is funny. I find that
yeah.
extremely funny. But there are also many other examples. I think that PDQ Bach or Peter Schickele, who are adored
Oh
actually,
yeah. Oh
um,
yeah.
he managed to do some very witty and sadly not well enough in Europe at least known stuff that I find also very funny just from the instrumental thing, because he's of course alluding to I mean, he's making fun of certain pieces that
Yeah.
people who do classical music know, and so it's this kind of inside humor, but it's humor that works. And then there's also something that I experienced the other day, actually, in a concert with a Korean ensemble. And I don't know if you know Korean traditional music, but there was this singer, and she's great. And she does this traditional style of Korean singing, which is extremely outrageous. It's like she sings and it's like, "Ah!" like this, and it's like it sounds like she's dying. The throat is screaming violently, and that's the way they do music. Everything is just like "Ah!" like this, you know. It's not there's no piano. There's nothing. It's like this, "Ah!" like this. And she had this costume where she was looking like a Christmas tree, and I loved it. I thought it was outrageous and extremely funny. Probably not funny as intended, but I enjoyed it immensely because it was so outrageous, so out there, and it inspired me for many pieces of music. I like these things where it's kind of like over the top.
Yeah.
These are the moments that I love. I love them in films where something is going on longer than you would expect to, or it is bigger than you would expect to, or it is smaller than you expect. So that's great. That's outrageous.
Yeah. Please send me a link to the Korean ensemble singing, if you could. Yes. Send me the link, because it sounds like Yoko. You know, Yoko Ono is truly an artist, and most people just chalked her off as she couldn't sing and she broke up the Beatles. No, she was an amazing artist.
She was an artist. She was not a musician, though. She was an artist.
Right, but
an artist. She was something else. But as a performance artist, I enjoy her work. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then if you haven't seen it, it is a must screening film. Soundtrack to the coup d'etat. It's how American jazz and the CIA killing a South America an African politician. It's an amazing film. It got nominated for an Oscar last year. And at the end, they have Abby Lincoln with Max Roach, and she does exactly what you did screaming. And it's like, you know, people think jazz is sort of nice, and it's like assaultive, and it really summarized the whole movie. Don't kill people, especially the CIA in these other countries. And she's like, it is scary screaming, but I'm much like you. I want to. McLuhan and Ezra Pound exchanged letters, and they said to needle the somnambulism. Like, get people out of their somnambulistic state.
This is our duty as artists, I think.
Yeah,
is to be outrageous, to be the wake up call for whatever. It doesn't have to be political. It can be a wake up call for how you experience the world. It can be life changing. We all know that art or experiences of art can be life changing, and they did change your life. They changed my life for sure. Yeah. And
it's amazing what you said, because Frank Zappa was probably going into Germany or Austria or somewhere, and the custom officer says, "You're a rock star. What are you on? Like, what drug are you on?" He goes, "I'm on duty." That was a beautiful. You are dedicated to your craft and you're articulate. Moritz, thank you so much. I look so forward to part 3 and reviewing part 2 because I'm going to learn a lot.
I love our talks, and I will most certainly be there for part 3.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, but like I said, I hope this never ends and we keep talking forever and ever. Dig infinity.
Yes.